Welcome to Capital Catch-Up, the podcast that breaks down what's happening on the Hill. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lainey. Today we're diving into a slate of bills that have been introduced in the House, a Senate version of a TANF reform, and a brief look at the latest congressional record entry. We'll explain what each measure does, why it matters, and how it could affect everyday Americans.
Let's start with the two Ukraine-focused measures. First up is House Resolution 3973, the Ukraine War Risk Insurance Act. This bill proposes a temporary war risk insurance program for commercial vessels that import or export goods to and from Ukraine. The idea is to give ship owners confidence that their cargoes are covered against damage or loss caused by the ongoing conflict.
The bill also creates an entity called the Insurance for Ukraine Initiative. That entity would promote war risk insurance and encourage European allies to invest in Ukraine's economic recovery. By reducing the insurance cost barrier, the legislation hopes to keep grain and other food commodities flowing out of Ukraine, which can help stabilize global food prices, a direct benefit to consumers here at home.
And the bill requires the Secretary of State to submit annual reports on progress and to provide diplomatic support to countries that offer war risk insurance. If passed, it could make it easier for U.S. exporters and importers to do business with Ukrainian partners, potentially expanding market opportunities for American firms.
The second Ukraine measure is House Resolution 2913, the Ukraine Support Act. This one is broader. It reaffirms U.S. commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, condemns Russian war crimes, and calls on NATO members to meet the 2% of GDP defense spending guideline. It authorizes economic aid, security assistance, and humanitarian assistance, and it creates a special coordinator for Ukrainian reconstruction.
That coordinator would be tasked with overseeing reconstruction projects, which could open contracts for U.S. construction firms, engineers, and technology providers. The bill also includes provisions to counter Russian disinformation and to impose sanctions on individuals responsible for human rights abuses. So the impact is both strategic and economic.
Moving from foreign policy to domestic assistance, a large portion of the docket today is focused on the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, or TANF. There are several bills, each tackling a different aspect of the program.
Let's start with House Resolution 2397, the Targeting TANF to Families in Need Act. It would amend the Social Security Act to require states to use TANF grants only for families whose income is below twice the federal poverty level. The amendment would take effect on October 1, 2026, tightening eligibility and ensuring that limited federal dollars go to the most vulnerable households.
Complementing that is House Resolution 2242, the Eliminating Fraud and Improper Payments in TANF Act. Introduced by Representative Arrington, it applies the Payment Integrity Information Act of 2019 to TANF. The Secretary of Health and Human Services would have to submit a report within a year outlining a plan to cut improper payments, with a 10-year goal of eliminating them. That could save billions in taxpayer dollars.
Then we have House Resolution 8872, the Preventing Waste, Fraud, and Abuse in TANF Act. This one builds on the previous two by adding deadlines for states to obligate and expend funds, and it explicitly prohibits states from using federal TANF dollars to replace their own spending. It also requires states to certify the federal funds will not supplant state or non-federal funds. The bill was reported with an amendment on May 29, 2026, and it would take effect on October 1, 2027.
House Resolution 2584, the Protect TANF Resources for Families Act, focuses on preventing federal TANF money from being used as a substitute for state spending. It also reauthorizes TANF for 2 years, extending the program through September 30, 2026. By protecting the federal contribution, the bill aims to keep the program's core services, like child care and job training, intact.
The Jobs and Opportunity with Benefits and Services, or Jobs for Success Act, appears twice, as House Resolution 3156 and as Senate Bill 1567. Both versions seek to reauthorize and reform TANF. They require states to develop individual opportunity plans for each work-eligible recipient, set clear work outcome metrics, and impose penalties on states that fail to meet those targets. The legislation also strengthens program integrity, improves data reporting, and eliminates outdated provisions.
The Senate version, Senate Bill 1567, follows the same structure, but moves through the Senate process, meaning it will be referred to the Senate Committee on Health, education, labor, and pensions for review. If the Senate passes it, the two chambers will need to reconcile any differences before it can become law.
There are also a few more TANF-related bills that address timing and budgeting. House Resolution 2108, the TANF State Expenditure Integrity Act of 2025, creates a TANF Program Integrity Unit within the Department of Health and Human Services to monitor subrecipient use of funds and to increase penalties for intentional misuse. It also calls for an annual report to Congress.
House Resolution 2359, the Improved Transparency and Stability for Families and Children Act, adds a rainy day provision. It lets states set aside up to 50% of their TANF allocation for future use, giving them flexibility to manage cash flow and maintain services during economic downturns. The bill also imposes deadlines for obligating and expending funds, aiming for greater predictability.
Shifting gears, let's talk about the education-related measures. First, House Resolution 7892, the No Aid for Ghost Students Act of 2026. This bill would require the Secretary of Education to deploy an identity fraud detection system for every FAFSA application. If a suspicious application is flagged, the applicant would be notified, and the school would have to verify the student's identity before any federal aid is disbursed.
That could protect both students and taxpayers from fraudulent aid claims. The bill also mandates reporting on the system's effectiveness, so Congress can see whether it's actually reducing fraud.
Next is House Resolution 7891, the Student Aid Fraud Oversight and Accountability Act of 2026. It builds on the previous bill by directing the Secretary of Education to prioritize program reviews of institutions that disburse aid without proper identity verification. It also requires institutions to verify identities whenever there is reasonable suspicion of fraud. Together, these two bills aim to tighten the FAFSA process and increase accountability for colleges and universities.
Then there's House Resolution 7981, the Stop Secret Counseling of Students Act. This measure would prohibit the use of federal funds for counseling, therapy, or guidance related to gender identity for students under 18 in public elementary and secondary schools. It also gives parents the right to sue schools that violate the restriction. The bill has sparked a debate about parental rights versus student access to supportive services.
Another education-related bill is House Resolution 7982, the Protect World Cup Attendees Act. While not an education bill per se, it addresses federal Homeland Security grant funding. It restricts the use of those funds for civil immigration enforcement activities during the 2026 World Cup.